Just because you buy and hold Bitcoin does not mean the market's going to give you a premium or value you long term. You're not holding the asset that's kicking ass, then you're not going to be kicking ass, and everyone else is. And what happens is money goes, hey, Mr. Investment Manager, why didn't I get the returns that my neighbor just got? And that's a very, very real thing. People escape inflation by buying assets. Government, therefore, has an incentive to print more money to push the price of those assets up so they can continue to tax the unrealized gains of those assets, which means people have to go into more assets, which means they print more money, which means the more they did, the sooner that they turn the Aussie dollar into the peso, the quicker the government takes literally everything. There's a crowbar next to my desk, and I'm certainly hoping I don't have to use it. They will hodl all the way to the bottom and they will puke it all back out at the cheapest possible price. The market will take the market lower and lower and lower and longer until they puke it all out. Thank you very much. Out you go, and away we go. That's how the bottom gets formed in the next day.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Join me today is James Check from Check on Chain. We're going to dive into a couple of interesting topics. Division 296, the super tax in Australia, knots versus core, Bitcoin being a flight to safety with what's going on with worldwide events. We are going to dive into the Bitcoin treasury companies, MNAV's over 6.8. Very interesting study in regards to AI. We've got some other things to be able to cover, but first things first, how are you, mate?
Good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, good. Grand and glorious day.
Mate, what are you bringing me on? I don't have any expertise in any of those subjects. You just brought some bloke in off the street. What are we doing here?
Well, I'm like, James, let's go. But even before that, where you are an expert is chopsolidation, brother. And Bitcoin, like for the last month, has been at 105,000, pretty much nonstop. And you know, Sailor's buying billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars of Bitcoin, and there's so many people, especially on X, they're crying and like they're so fucking manipulated, and they're all getting their panties in a knot, and just acting emotionally immature in regards to it. Like it's a financial asset that we're playing with it, but like, how can all these companies be buying billions of dollars of Bitcoin and the price is just chopsolidating?
Because people are selling billions of dollars to Sailor. Like it's
No
just
way.
it's just really simple. There's
No,
a
it's
lot of
fucking manipulated, bro.
I know. What I tweeted the other day, the number one source of price suppression is people's boredom. People just get so bored, right? And they start concocting these stories. It's like, guys, what happened? What has happened the last two times that we've chopsolidated? The first one was in 2023, you could say, 20 to 30K. What happened? We went to 45. And then we went up to 75. And then what happened then? We chopsolidated for 8 months. And then what happened? Oh, yeah, we went to 110K. And now we're chopsolidating in this like other range. However you want to describe this thing, 105. Like, guys, we're like a stone's throw from the all-time high. And you know how this plays out? It goes down to go up. Like, that's so often. People are going to get so upset about this whole thing. It's going to, like, there's one of two things. It's either going to rip and explode to the upside, or we're going to get this beautiful little sell-off and everyone's going to go, see, I told you it's manipulated. That people will capitulate and panic, and then it will just springboard straight up to new all-time highs. Like, chopsolidation is part of the process. When you hit the buy button, you don't want the market to send. Sailor wants to buy, and then the market moves, right? And this is just how markets work. Get over it.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. And mate, I really do hope we get one of those big, beautiful wicks down. I think it was last week is buying Bitcoin. I think it was at like a 107,000 or something when I saw it the day before. And then like over that 24-hour period, I think it pumped up like, say, like 107,500 or whatever it was. But over the 24-hour period, I'd bought it at a higher price than what I saw it the day previous. But because the chart had flashed red, I'm like, fucking let's go. And I got excited. Even though I was buying at a more expensive price, I just love the red days. And hopefully that's a takeaway for people out there. The red days are good. But
well, hang on. Let me just jump in here because we've set up for the business a daily DCA, just so we're just continuously buying for the company.
Yeah.
And I actually I run some studies to find out what is the best day of the week, Monday through Sunday. What is the best day of the week, and then what is the best hour of the day when you get the most red. So over like a 24-hour period, what is the best hour and what is the best day? So we set up 2 DCAs to try and capitalize on both of these. And thus far, just empirically, it seems to be going pretty well. So for us Aussies, I don't know, because you Queenslanders do or don't do daylight savings, but you can work it out. 11 p.m. Sydney time, statistically speaking, is the most read hour of the day. So our DCA goes off every day at 11 p.m. And Fridays seem to be the reddest of the days. So on Fridays at 11 p.m., we do our daily DCA, and we also do a bit of a lump sum as well. So we have like a double DCA at 11 p.m. on a Friday. So you can work out what that is in your respective time zones relative to Sydney. But so far, every time I go to bed, I usually go to bed about 10 o'clock. I check the price, and it's usually redder than it's been all day. And then when I wake up in the morning, it's always higher than when I went to sleep. So I don't know what happens in that last hour. I haven't actually checked, but thus far, empirically, it seems to be doing its job.
So that's so cool, and it's really interesting, like approaching a DCA from the data points. With the data points and like continuing with the chopsolidation. So it's been about a month, 105,000 up and down. How long usually do chopsolidation periods go on? Like I feel and feel I'm just basing it off my own fucking vibe, bro. It's about 3 months. But what's
It
the
totally
data actually
depends.
say?
Yeah, it totally depends. And by the way, the stats I just gave you is specifically from 2023 onwards, because I've been writing a lot of pieces about how this cycle, it is different. It's also very much the same, but it's also its own thing. And to give you a bit of a sense of scale of why that is, over the last 30 days, Bitcoin's had, it's about $35 billion worth of capital inflows, 35. Bitcoin's market cap in May 2017, like almost at the all-time high, was 35 billion. So the last 30 days of capital flowing in is everything
Wow.
up until May 2017. So rub that out. The ETFs and the strategy companies, the treasury companies, if you add those together, we've got about $230 billion in total assets. Half of it's ETFs, half of it's, or maybe less than half, but 132 is ETFs, and then the rest is treasuries. That's like 4 days before the all-time high in it's like November or December 2017. So you got to realize that like just the shit that's happened in the last 12 months is bigger than Bitcoin was in the entire previous cycle, the whole market cap. So you've got to remember that, like, when we talk about chopsolidation, we talk about price suppression. That is how big we are now. It's like the rest of the cycles do not matter. They're a footnote. They don't even count. Now, in terms of chopsolidation, it very much depends on the time frame. The reason why I gave it chopsolidation, we all have heard of consolidation, right? Consolidation is a typical term in TA. Chopsolidation actually comes from a metric called the choppiness index, which I learned very early in my markets career, and it works on different time frames. So markets cannot go up or down in a straight line. You'll see this is why they consolidate. It's like a guy going for a long run. At some time, you've got to slow down, have a drink of water, catch your breath, and then you can go for the next round. Markets are no different. So in the 2024 period, it was 8 months. Why was it 8 months? Because we had a like 10-month or a 12-month run where it basically just went up. It just didn't stop for that whole since FTX, just kept going up. So you had a really long uptrend. You need a really long period of rest and recuperation. So in our current environment, the move is really coming from April to now. So that's what, 2.5, 2 months, something like that. So
Yeah.
therefore, something on the order of like a month is probably about right. So I would say we're getting close to the next move. I think we're pretty close to wherever we want to go next. It feels like it's coming up soon, because the last move that preceded it was actually fairly short from April onwards.
Yeah. And obviously we can't know what the price is going to be on this next month, but like a lot of people are talking about 120K. Over our last conversations, you said if Bitcoin ended up sort of like 120 to 150K, that would be fair value. Do you reckon the next move could send us to 120K, or we'd probably fall a bit
Oh, I mean,
short,
I think
psych
120K.
people
No,
out?
120K feels. I mean, I would be surprised if we don't get to 120, 125 on the next move. Honestly. Now that said, that is where I expect people to start really ramping up the sell side. But you got to remember, though, right? Markets are a balance of supply and demand. There's most likely going to be a bunch of people selling up at that 120, 125 range. But if demand is coming in, then you just keep going, right? If demand just keeps soaking up that supply, you can keep going. And the way that a lot of my models work, the longer that we chopsolidate, the more capital we absorb, the more people's cost basis. Like, and I try to frame it like this: are you like, I'll ask you a question. Are you used to 100K prices? Does 100K feel normal to you? And the second
Yeah.
question is, if I asked you that same question, we were trading down at 20,000 after FTX blew up, would $100,000 feel normal to you? Probably. Like, give me
Yeah.
your answers to those.
Yeah. So yes, it feels very normal. And then like going back to FTX, like we knew it was coming. Just math. Finite supply, best money in the world. You knew 100K, but then when it happened, you're like, whoa, like this happened way quicker than what
It
I
felt a
what
long
I
way away.
thought. Yeah, it felt like
Yeah,
ages away. But now that it's here, you're like, oh, we've dipped. Like we're dipped to $105,000. Like fucking do
exactly.
something. Like here's the stick, man.
Exactly. So that's exactly right. So
A quick message about today's sponsor, the Bitcoin Way. If you still have your Bitcoin on an exchange or you're using a hardware wallet that's not air gapped, it's not open source, reach out to the Bitcoin Way. First 30 minutes, it's free. The team has over 25 years cybersecurity experience. They can help you take your Bitcoin into self-custody. Safety Moose, the author of the Bitcoin Standard, endorses this team. They'll never touch your keys or your coins, but they'll empower you to become self-sovereign. They can teach you how to run a node, can assist with multi-sig, cybersecurity, inheritance planning, running VPNs, and so much more. And the team, they can even help you obtain a second passport. Bitcoin, it's generational wealth. Learn the skills today. I've put a link at the top of the description. And again, the first 30 minutes is free.
it takes time for investors, traders, buyers, hodlers to become acclimatized to new price ranges.
Huh.
So if you go back and think about the first rally, December and November, when we got to like 90, I think it was literally at $99,800, and then we sold. Everyone's like, come
890,
on.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So we got like within a stone's throw, and then we went through it, and everyone was like, I wrote a piece where I was like, we fucking did it. Like we got there. We got to 100 grand. Can you imagine that we got there? It was a novelty. But now you're right. It dips to like 104 and then goes back to 105. I'm like, yeah, nice. That's a good day. Like
Yeah.
$105,000, 162,000 Australian dollars. Like what the hell? It feels way more normal now. And like, I don't know
Yeah.
about you. I have acclimatized myself. For Americans, you're only just feeling this, where $1,000 doesn't get you a million sats anymore. Us Aussies, we've been doing this for like what? I don't know, like a
A
year and a
long
half
time.
now. We've
Yeah.
been doing this for a long time, where $1,000 doesn't go anywhere. And I get it, $1,000 in two currencies is not the same, but you get the
Yeah.
point. $1,000 is still $1,000 no matter where you are in
Yeah.
your currency, and it buys fuck all now. So there's this acclimatization period. So as people become more acclimatized to it, our cost basis in general climbs. The more you stack sats, the more your cost basis rises. Big money starts coming. Institutions only know Bitcoin at $70,000 plus. Before 70 grand, they didn't care. It was like a random trading token that no one cared about. Now it's like on their doorstep, and they're like, hey, I need to get an allocation to this. Cool, put 2% in. Not, oh, it feels expensive. It's 100 grand. It's like, no, put 2% of the portfolio in. Don't care what you pay for it. Just get me exposure. So as that happens, where we can go to the top price levels, they start to climb because you've got capital flowing in that's supporting the trend. When you've got money flowing into the system, these things will move and shift around. So look, 150, if we get there, I think we deserve to be there, honestly. The current models that I have, so last time we spoke, it would have been about 150. They're currently up about 175. That's where, like, it's statistically speaking, we're very, very overheated there. Can we keep going? Absolutely. It's improbable that we just shoot to 200 and stay there. I think if we went to 200 or higher than that, I would hazard a guess we're going to come back down and just reestablish equilibrium somewhere that is probably not 200. We've given a long enough time frame, we'll go to $1,000,000, but there's going to be lots
Yeah.
of ups and downs to get there.
Yep. I was listening into a conversation with James and Peter Dunworth on X the other night, and I caught like 5 minutes of it. And the part that I happened is Peter Dunworth saying, in the next 5 years, Bitcoin could be somewhere between 1 and 10 million. In the next 10 years, it's going to be $10 million. And like Peter's like fucking always bullish, but from like what you just said is Bitcoin will get to $1 million. Looking at the data and stuff, is that realistic in 5 years' time that it's somewhere between 1 and 10 million, or a million's on the higher side of things?
It's look, I don't know. I think shit has to go really wrong in the world to get to there. Um, look, I don't think it's happening in that kind of time frame. At the same time, like again, I think that Bitcoin is destined to go up forever, and I've been using this mental model. It's like, look, for the foreseeable future, I truly couldn't pretend to look beyond. Like currently, my models are saying we get to 175, and again, these are all just zones. Don't worry about the actual number. If we get up 150 and plus, we're going to be really statistically overheated. Could this time be different? Yeah, it could be. For me as an analyst, it would be improper of me to say to my subscribers and go like, look, we're going to $1 million tomorrow. Like to me, that
Let's
feels just like,
go.
yeah. Let's do something that, statistically speaking, has never happened before, and
Yeah,
not even never happened. Like even in 2012, that kind of a move doesn't make sense. So like, it would just be improper of me to do that.
yeah.
Now, could it happen? Anything could happen. We could go to zero as well. I don't think that's going to happen either. So like, you've got to bound this thing up. So look, I understand the bullishness. I'm very long Bitcoin. So if that happens, I'm a happy man. I'll take the gravy. But
Yeah.
until that time, I can only look as far as I can look ahead.
I want to dive into the Bitcoin treasury companies. I think you'll have quite a unique take, but like we're talking about Bitcoin and like literally, James, we're talking about Bitcoin at $105,000 US. You just said $163,000 Australian. Like basically, it's the most expensive that it's ever been. It's the highest price, like give or take a couple of $1,000s. So what? But there'll be a couple of people watching this show, and if you are new to Bitcoin, like well done for sticking this far into your first Bitcoin show. That's pretty intense. You chose the wrong one, but follow this guy. Is 105,000 not knowing if Bitcoin's going to be at $1 million in 5 years, 10 years, maybe it takes longer, shorter, whatever. For someone like coming into the space and they're like, oh, it's too expensive. For me, I'm like, fuck, it's still buying it. It's cheap compared to where it's going. But like, how do you communicate that? Or what would you say in regards to the offhand comment? Oh, you just got lucky. Bitcoin's too expensive for me. I'm never going to make it. I'm going to like live my broke little life and not do anything to change my circumstances. How can you communicate that? Maybe there is still a little bit of hope in there, or would you not bother?
I mean, look, it's one of those things like, based on what? Your assessment of it's too expensive based on what? Like,
Yeah.
oh, that's just a feeling that you've got. And like, generally speaking, and like, you know, it's a bit harsh to say, but like a lot of people just frankly missed the move up until now. And that's perfectly okay. Because the way that Bitcoin is positioned, right? It's what, the fifth biggest asset in the world. Here's another line from Peter Dunworth that I think is so unbelievably important to understand. Yes, the price is 100,000. It used to be 10,000. At that time, 10,000 felt horribly expensive. And yet here we are at 100,000. Same is true from 1,000 to 10,000 and so on and so forth. So the thing that Peter Dunworth said, which I think is very important to understand, the risk that Bitcoin went to zero when it was trading at $100 was extraordinarily high. When it was trading at $1,000, it was also very, very high. The regulatory environment hated Bitcoin. At 10,000, the regulatory environment hated Bitcoin. At 15,000, when FTX blew up, after being at 70,000, it was like literally the narrative was Bitcoin is dead for a decade. This is what was screaming throughout every social media platform. Everyone was saying, wow, we have just been nuked beyond oblivion. It's going to take us decades to recover from this. 2 years later, we're trading at $100,000 from 15K. So it always feels expensive, but the
Yeah.
risk at 105,000 has been evaporated. We have the biggest asset managers in the world launching the most successful ETFs that have ever launched. The ETFs are in 18 months are 50% the size of gold. Gold ETFs are like 260 billion. We're 135 billion 18 months in. So
Wow.
you just look at some of these ratios and you go, look, in this world that we're currently in, which is fiat's going to get debased forever. And I was talking about this at breakfast actually with Alec. Um, Fiat's going to get debased forever. The governments are bankrupt and they have to print the money based on the debt, just the debt problem that they have alone. Now we're compounding this by saying, oh, by the way, not only do you governments have a debt problem, but there's a whole lot of jobs and stuff that's going to get automated away with AI. Like we were talking about tech businesses. And like, how many of these tech businesses just aren't going to hire more people because they're going to instead replace that with automated systems and blah, blah, blah. Suddenly, just like the reality that the governments are going to have to support more and more people, whether it's UBI, whatever they end up doing, they'll find some system for it. They were already fucked with the debt problem, let alone with all of the changes that are coming globally. Like, yes, there's going to be productivity booms, but it's also not going to be fairly distributed. So, like, there's just so many things. Like, Bitcoin's better than gold in just every discernible metric. Bitcoin's 10% of gold's market cap. The ETF's already 50% of gold's ETFs. The reality that Bitcoin gets to gold's market cap today, that's a 10x move. There's your $1 million Bitcoin. And by the way, that's my base case. Like, I'm actually not really that interested in selling until we get there, because I do believe that's like the next 10 years. We're going to get to gold's market cap. Gold is currently 25 trillion or 24 trillion. 24 trillion. I think gold is going to go from 3.5 grand to 10 grand US because of this problem. So not only is Bitcoin going to go to gold's current market cap, I think it's going to grow in dominance versus gold, and gold's going to get bigger as well. So like, you combine all of this stuff, it's like, based on what? Because when I'm looking at this puzzle, I just see gold and Bitcoin mooning endlessly, and I cannot see any way that nothing stops this train. I can't see how that stops. I'm not late to Bitcoin. I'm late into the fiat system. You're already late in the fiat system. The whole idea is to get out of the fiat system. Like, Bitcoin and gold are early relative to what is actually there. The fiat system's late. That's expensive. I want to get out of that system and move into the other ones.
That's an epic way to be able to have a mind model with that. I guess for anyone, the big print, if you don't understand the problem, why that's happening now, that's going to cause Bitcoin and gold to continue to go up.
I got a hand-signed copy from the man himself.
I've got one there as well. I try not to touch it too much. I want to get it framed. It's something that I'll keep for the rest of my life. It's freaking an amazing book. Truly.
I haven't actually read it yet. It's
holy shit.
No, mate. I've got 2 more books before it. I've got a reading list, and I'm getting there. And the main reason is not because I don't want to read it. It's because I've been reading so many Bitcoin books that I actually just wanted to go back and just live in a fantasy world for a little period of time. So I'm like giving my brain a break, and then I'll dive back in. So it's a necessary thing.
There's this lady at the gym, man. She's a pocket rocket. She's in her mid-60s. And before I get to the gym, she's already been running on the treadmill for an hour. She takes this pre-workout, and she just does not stop talking the whole time. She's like this little Energizer bunny. And going on and, I hand out like a lot of copies of beers for Bitcoin. I just put a big stack of them at the gym and stuff. I'm like, have you read this? She's like, no. I'm like, it's quickest, easiest way you can start to get a bit of an understanding, because I'd found out a couple of years ago or whatever, she bought $1,000 of Bitcoin or whatever, and it's in CoinSpot, hasn't been able to get it out. Cool. But I said, beers for Bitcoin. She's like, oh, what about an audio book? I'm like, you need to listen to the big print. Like, just listen to the big print and stuff. And she's like, yeah, cool, going on a road trip, we'll do it. And came back, she's like, oh, I didn't get the chance to be able to listen to them. Like, well, you're listening to audio books while you're working out each morning. Why don't you just start doing it? And yesterday she came up to me and she's like, I've started listening to the big print. She's like, it's really interesting. There's some like really big thoughts in there. I'm like, unfortunately, like, it's all true. Like, this is what's happening. I don't mean to scare you, but I'd definitely be paying attention to it. Like, easy enough for you. You understand what the problem is, but people are like waking up. But I think just the book, the point I'm getting at is it lets you know what's going on, why it's going on, and why mathematically the governments are going to keep printing, why Bitcoin's market cap at $2.08 trillion is still cheap US. That is. And just to like sort of drive home the point of Bitcoin being so cheap and it's like the least risky, you're saying like hedge funds, pension funds, etc. They're just like, yeah, we'll allocate 2%. As the market cap of Bitcoin gets bigger and bigger and bigger, does that actually take away more and more risk from these companies going in? Because they're going to look like a fool if they're not in there.
Of course. No, absolutely. Because then it becomes like, it's the same as saying, like, why do all these companies have an allocation to the Magnificent Seven? Because everyone else has got an allocation to the Magnificent Seven. And if Bitcoin keeps doing what Bitcoin does, which is kicking ass, and you're not holding the asset that's kicking ass, then you're not going to be kicking ass. And everyone else is. And what happens is money goes, hey, Mr. Investment Manager, why didn't I get the returns that my neighbor just got? And that's a very, very real thing. But you need the first couple of guys to step in, take an allocation, and prove the point before all these other, I mean, people are herd animals. No one wants to be the first guy to test out this new device. Once everybody's got the device and it's a very normal thing, it's in everyone's portfolio. And
Yeah.
by the time you get there, the more people who are working this out quicker than others, eventually everyone has worked it out and it's normal. And once it's normal, you don't think about it in the way that we do at the moment. The fact that we're still having this conversation today means that we are still early, because like, you wouldn't be, how many people sit around and do this with gold? No one, because it's a normal thing. You know what I mean? Like, people
Yeah.
just don't do this. So there's like 2 podcasts out there that talk about gold. There's like 2 podcasts every 20 minutes on Bitcoin, because there's so many people going, wow, look at this thing I found. And every single Bitcoiner you've ever spoken to, I mean, you have the exact same story. You can probably count the amount of people on one hand that you managed to convince to actually buy this thing, because people just simply don't get it. And it doesn't mean it's
Yeah.
it's not correct. It just means that people just haven't worked it out yet.
I worked out that since August last year, I've spent $2,200 buying books on other people's education on Bitcoin. That's a lot of books, and I think it'd be like 5, 6, maybe 7 people max
Yeah, exactly.
that would
It's
have taken action. It's crazy.
And you only need a handful of crazy ones to change the world.
That's
But
right.
and everyone benefits from the iPhone, but it took a couple of crazy dudes to come up with it. So you don't need everyone to work it out, but if you do work it out, you're gonna be in a better spot.
100%. And you've got the capacity, like just to break it simply down for the audience, my view is the Australian dollar, all fiat currency is going to be worth less and less and less. So if you're saving in bad money, you're not really going to be able to save or be able to live a life of freedom or of choice by saving in better money. For me, I believe that's Bitcoin. I'll still be able to have capacity to be help friends and family, the community, like what Peter McCormack's doing over in Bedford with the coffee
That's
shop,
amazing.
the footy team and things like that, bringing jobs in, giving people opportunities and stuff. That's what Bitcoin allows, simply because he chose a better money. Or he could have made all the money from the podcast and just kept saving in fiat dollars, and he wouldn't have been able to do what he's doing.
Yeah, totally. I was over there for the Bedford conference. It was fantastic, by the way. If you get a chance, it's well worth it. It's one of the few things I'll get in a plane and go to London for. Really, really good conference, and you can see that he's actually changing that part of the world. Really, quite a very commendable and an impressive thing. And you're right. And I think you used a very important word there. A lot of people miss. I don't invest in Bitcoin. I save in Bitcoin. It's a very, very different thing, but
Yeah.
I really do believe it's my savings account and I treat it as such. I don't buy it to speculate. And honestly, I don't look at the reason I look at the price is actually not to check my portfolio. I really hold 2 assets, gold and Bitcoin. I check the price of gold often because and I update the spreadsheet for my portfolio. I couldn't tell you what my net worth is in Bitcoin because I don't ever check it and compare it to the dollar. I literally don't. It's just not part of my mechanics. I view gold as an asset that I will eventually sell to acquire other things. Eventually, I'll do that with Bitcoin to a small extent, but really, it's just a savings account for when I need it, if and when I need it. I don't think
Yeah.
about it at all, and it's a very, very different beast.
Yeah, I love that. And I had something similar. I think it might have even been last night. I was thinking about like pricing Bitcoin in Bitcoin or in fiat terms. I'm like, I could just like peel off 20 grand and, the next day it could just appear again there or whatever. And like, you wouldn't even notice. But I'm like, fuck that. Like, I would notice that the Satoshis have gone down. And like, that's the way I see it. I'd have less Bitcoin, even though Bitcoin could pump, another 15, 20, 30, 50%, 100% or whatever, and gain that all back. I'm like, but I'd have less Bitcoin. and that's what I want to be saving. And I want to be saving in the better money and getting rid of the lesser money. I want to flip gears. You put out another post with like, I think it said like what could go wrong in regards to the Bitcoin treasury companies, MNAVs over 6.8, etc. You can get a Bitcoin for $15,000, bro. Like what's the risk? But like, what is the risk, I guess, with it? But also, like, before you dive into that, what are your thoughts just on Bitcoin treasury companies? Are they like the greatest thing for companies in the financial markets that's ever existed, apart from like actual Bitcoin, or is it just like the new shitcoin season?
New shitcoin season, for sure. However, there are a few distinguishing features here. So just for absolute clarity, what we're talking about with these Bitcoin treasury companies, I would put them in two buckets. And I actually had a long conversation with Preston, which will be out on his podcast in a couple of weeks,
Sick.
on this exact topic. And both of us had a very similar dialogue. We put them in two buckets. Now, I'm not going to have an exhaustive list of these, but like just generally speaking, I'm trying to think of the word we used. It was something like they're doing it properly or something like that. But anyway, there's a pool of companies who are zombie companies who are being acquired, turned into whatever to try and get their stock price up because they're just a shit firm, right? Or they're being taken over and turned into these things. Shit coins, they're going to go up for a period of time and they're going to get absolutely decimated in the bear market, is my honest opinion. So the other side of the equation are companies that are very, very serious. They're going hard or they're going home. And I think a lot of them are going to go home, but some of them are just that they have made acquiring Bitcoin their business model. But do not think about these things as acquiring Bitcoin. That is not the trade. The trade is not who has the biggest measuring contest. The trade is what are you going to do with it? So, for example, strategy, and I would say Metaplanet is trying to, they've got a very unique situation, Metaplanet, because they're in Japan. And Japan has it's very odd. To hold spot Bitcoin, your capital gains tax is like 45 or 50%. So it's much higher. If you own stocks, it's like 20%. So it's much less. I'm going to get those numbers wrong. I should actually confirm those, but I know that's of that kind of magnitude. So there is a natural reason to own a treasury company like Metaplanet versus Bitcoin. Maybe an MNAV of 6x is a little bit expensive, but that's also a growth potential. Strategy is really the benchmark, and I'm actually quite constructive on strategy. I've flip-flopped for a long time. I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. I actually like strategy. I think, generally speaking, what they're doing, they are pre-buying. So think about this. They are pre-buying centuries of dividend payments in Bitcoin today. They're issuing all of these bonds. Yes, they're issuing all of these bonds, whether in Strife, Strike, Stride, these preferred stocks, which are effectively tokenized bonds, is the best way to think about them. They pay a 10% dividend. They're perpetual, so they last forever. He is buying a huge stockpile of future dividends because if Bitcoin goes where we think it's going to go, that treasury is centuries of value to pay out to those shareholders, right? So if you take his total interest expense as a liability, imagine they stop accumulating forever and then they just slowly sell down the Bitcoin to cover those bonds. Michael Saylor will be dust in the earth, as will every employee and every one of his employees' children's children by the time he runs out of money to pay those bonds. That is the product, folks. That is the product. You go and look at any of these other companies and you're like, oh, you're just going out there and using leverage to buy Bitcoin. You know what's going to happen? That leverage is going to wipe you and your shareholders out when the bad time comes, because the bad times will come. But at the same time, strategy has the size, scale, and scope to survive a bear market. They've done it before. They've got instruments to do it again. I don't think they're going to have a problem because they've just hit escape velocity. Yeah, there can be stress points, but I don't think so. A lot of these little firms, let's call it what it is. They're shitcoin companies. They just happen to be shitcoins that buy Bitcoin, but they are still shitcoins. People are going to speculate on them as shitcoins. They're going to get destroyed just like they did with shitcoins. And I suspect that they will trade much the same way, which is down only versus Bitcoin over any long period of time. So have fun while the casino is running, but be very, very careful, folks. A lot of these things will not work very well. In fact, they'll work horribly in the bear market is my base case. Very happy to be proven otherwise, but my base case is that there's going to be a handful of winners which will also get smoked in the bear, but not nearly to the same extent.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good approach. It's your money, it's your choice, ladies and gentlemen. Do what you want, but don't risk the whole bag of Bitcoin. That is actual money when held in self custody. To I think you use the best word, like it's a casino. And so go out
Yeah.
there if you want to gamble, but that's on you.
And the
Um,
longer this goes on, the more of these things are going to pop up. They're going to come with all sorts of creative ways to do it. But me personally, until I can see like a very, very clever show me the product, and I understand the product from strategy. I'm not going to pretend to say that I understand it, but I've mentally done the loops to be like, I've satisfied myself that I understand enough about it, that I think it's fascinating what strategy is doing. Honestly, I think it's very, very innovative. It's going to piss a lot of TradFi guys off because they're not going to get it, but it's extremely interesting. It has taught me about the world of finance in a way that only Bitcoin comes close to doing. Everything else to me just looks like leverage.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I find it absolutely fascinating what Sailor's doing, and then the community as well, and like what Punter Jeff and the messaging, like just the intellectual conversation around it. I don't know enough to be able to say whether it's good or bad, or to buy it or not, but it's absolutely fascinating regardless. And then you can contrast that with some of these shitcoin companies. That are just trying to get on that bandwagon. And it's like shitcoins in general. Like Bitcoin's
Yeah.
the thing, and they're like, we're blockchain technology like Bitcoin, but like
.com.
something different.
Yeah,
You're like, fuck off.
GameStop.blockchain. That's I mean, it's the same shit, right? And the market is smoking them appropriately, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. You are either in this trade properly. This is not about buying Bitcoin. And I think this is the most important thing to take away. Just because you buy and hold Bitcoin does not mean the market's going to give you a premium or value you long term. Sure, you may have some kind of equity in the company, but I believe that when this bear market comes, and eventually it will, don't pretend that it won't, eventually the bear market will
This
come.
time's different, bro.
Many of these companies, just like the miners that came before them, the original treasury companies, just like the miners before them, they will hodl through the top. They will hodl all the way to the bottom, and they will puke it all back out at the cheapest possible price. The market will take the market lower and lower and lower and longer until they puke it all out. Thank you very much. Out you go, and away we go. That's how the bottom gets formed in the next bear.
Yeah. I cannot wait. I cannot wait.
Me
I
too.
wonder what it'll
Me
be.
too.
It's yeah, it's fascinating. I truly love the red days. Flipping gears once again, you posted something and it stopped me for a moment. And was it a Harvard study? If I like, I think this just goes to prove the point of your tweet. But basically, as you're reposting about a study that was done on AI, as just a 4-month study, people using it, they're actually not getting smarter or more productive. What are your thoughts in regards to AI? You also said like you don't use it to outsource your thinking. That's
Yeah.
the best part. But what's your thoughts with AI? Because at the start of this conversation, you said like we've got all these headwinds, or the government has all these headwinds, and AI was one of them. But if it's maybe dumbing us down, like how's that benefit, or how's that going to create something good?
Yeah, I mean, like AI is a tool, and it's incredible. And it's very early in its kind of implementation stage, but it obviously speeds a lot of things up. It I use a lot of the time for coding because all my charts I build myself, and the AI has now learnt how my code works. So there's a lot of times where I just like describe what I want to do, and then it will basically build a lot of it for me. So this is stuff that literally just saves me key presses and time. It doesn't get it always right, but it's it's kind of understands the code. So there's a big efficiency gain for me there. Sometimes when I'm writing a report, I'm like, oh, okay, I know that this event, like, tell me when this particular event happened, or maybe I need to get a company like, go and find all the times that strategies issued debt and give it to me in a table. I could go through every single strategy document and find when they issued debt, or I could just ask AI to go and just sort it out for me, give it to me in a table. Good. Like an advanced search, go and find it on a fact finding mission. What I do not do, and I actually had a comment in one of my, because I did for all my reports, I do written and I do video. And my process is I go through all my charts and I go looking for what I want to talk about, and I build up a set of charts. I'm literally doing it before I jumped on this call. Once I've got the charts there, I mark them all up. That's where I do a lot of my important thinking. Then I actually bring them in and I write the piece. And generally speaking, it's just like a one and done. I write from top to bottom. I bring each chart in. I put some commentary around it, and I go through it once, do a single proofread, and then that's my thinking. That's my deepest thinking time, where I get a lot of my creative energy, and I also inject my own personal flair, my own stories and anecdotes, and just shit that I have lived through in the Bitcoin world to help illustrate points. Because
Yeah.
I speak to hodlers and people, not to machines. So I think people enjoy to read my stuff because it's got a human side to it.
Yeah.
I then do my video recording, which is I do it after it's a half-hour video. It's basically the same content, but you get to hear my emphasis on words. And some people just prefer the video, some people read, some people do both. But anyway, whenever I'm traveling or sometimes I'm time constrained, I can rip the video in half an hour, and that makes it. I can just get the point across, and then I'll just do a summary copy, because the text is really what takes a lot of the time. The text and the charts. That's where most of my investment go in terms of time, but it's also where I do my deepest thinking. So it's a bit of a balance, right? If the video is good and it's got a lot of my thinking in there, but if I've had that, full day of developing charts, doing the thinking, doing the writing, actually using my brain, the video is always going to be better because I've done a whole lot of work. And I had one guy
100%.
comment, yeah, there was one time where I think I only released a written report, because it was one of those pieces where it was quite thoughtful, and like it wasn't so much about the charts, it was more of a conceptual idea, a little bit harder because it's harder to go over charts when there's no charts, if that makes sense. So the video was actually going to be harder to do, and I was also time constrained, and I'd written this
Yeah.
piece on the plane anyway. And he goes, "Oh, that's interesting. I thought that you did the video and then just created the report out of the transcript." I was like, "No, it's the exact opposite. I do all of my
Mm,
thinking for the written work. That's where I do my process. And that's where I inject all of my thoughts.
yeah.
I don't use AI for any of it. I don't touch AI for my writing. I don't touch it for my videos. I don't touch it for anything that's like part of my process, because my analysis, I don't trust the AI to do my thinking. I will never
Yeah.
outsource my thinking to the AI. And getting back to your original question about this study, what it basically showed, and I can't remember the exact stats, but people who used AI as a tool were better off. People who used AI as a crutch, as in ran everything through, they would
Yeah.
issue a document, and then that, like, it was like 35 or 40% of them couldn't quote a single line from their own report like a couple of hours later. Me, I can quote
Wow.
tweet you, like, I'm always calling back to past pieces and saying, as we covered in this piece, or we talked about this, let's re-bring that idea in. Like, I've actually got my last like 6 months of newsletters in my head, and I can pull out certain topics and ideas and concepts. And my newsletter is not a newsletter. It's a whole product. It's like every single edition builds on the ideas of the previous ones. So it's very much like a linear proof of work of all these different stepping stones of understanding. I can remember all that stuff because that's how I got there. There's a whole journey for me to create that. In my view, that's me exercising my muscle, right? That is
Yeah.
me going to the mental gym. If I just gave all my reports and my transcripts to AI, yes, it'd be way more efficient, but would it have the story about me buying the top in 2017 and how that felt? Would it have the story of me like not being concerned about FTX blowing up because I realized that, hey, my coins are on my cold card, not on an exchange? Like, I didn't feel like I lost anything. AI doesn't have any of these experiences. It
Yeah.
didn't live through any of these events. And look, I've had a lot of conversations with people talking about this subject. And my line has always been, I think human creativity, in a world where AI slop is everywhere, human creativity is going to go at a premium. And I've had a lot of people say that's just not how, like, the average person doesn't know that it's AI slop. And I said, well, that's probably true. But I'm a very big believer in they call it the 80-20 rule. I think it's more of a 95-5 rule, that 5% of the people get done 95% of the work. You could
Yeah.
argue that it's an 80-20 rule, and then of that 20, 80% do nothing and 20%, like, it's all a proportional thing. I generally optimize my newsletter for people who want to be there. So
Yeah.
I think that's an important framework. I do not produce content for people who just want to come in fair weather and get I don't give stop losses and entry points and all that shit. That's not what it's all about. No one cares. I write for hodlers. I don't care about if you want to trade on it, go nuts. But I write for hodlers who want to understand why Bitcoin does what it does. And in order to do that, any machine can write that, but no machine can write my story. And that's really how I like to think about it. I'm not just an analyst. I'm actually telling people how I feel and how I think about things. And AIs don't feel or think about anything because they're just predictors for what the next word is. So it's a long-winded way of saying, like, I think human creativity has a premium. I like to exercise my creative muscle. I know a lot of people are going to use AI for everything, and they are going to lose the capacity to think and generate these insights, which, frankly, if that study is correct, then my thesis is actually more true that people who continue to exercise their mind use AI as a tool, as an accelerator, but do not outsource your thinking, because I don't know about you, but for me, I love my job because the thinking is literally my favorite thing. I like doing the legwork and going through that process. If you don't do that, what the hell's the point? So I don't know. I like the challenge. I like the puzzle.
It's super interesting with that because my experience, I'm using it on average about 4 hours a day, and it's improved my critical thinking. So I wanted to get your take. But you're saying when people intentionally use it as a tool, it is beneficial. But if they're using it as a crutch, so I'm not asking AI to do my thinking for me. Like I'm going to it with the problem, and
Yes,
especially like
but you
with a
need
lot of
that
code
creative thing
as
to come
well.
up with a
That's
question.
right.
Yes.
That's right. And that's what I've noticed working with AI, like intensely 4 hours a day since August last year, is the way that I'm asking questions, the more specific that I'm being, like the details that I'm asking, or like where I pull it up or stop it, or like get it to go into deeper areas or whatever it is, has become clearer and more concise, which has been amazing because, like, truth be told, smoked a lot in my youth and have like a shit memory. And it's something that I'm actively improving every single day. Like I remember everyone's name at the gym and stuff, which is something I haven't been able to do before. And like I've been working on my memory for the past 10 years and it incrementally gets better. But intentionally using AI as a tool, it's been a life hack. And I think it's something that people should not ignore and should be paying attention to because like right now I'm doing the job of like 2.5 full-time people with what I can achieve with AI and what I've built with AI since August last year. It would have taken 4 people full-time doing it like at least, but we've put like systems and things in place to be able to get that time back. And then like I can over leverage myself because I've got this amazing tool. So don't like just put your head in the sand. It's something worth using for the right things. But yeah, I think that's absolutely fascinating. Now
Sure,
coming
and
back
just
to
like to touch on
yeah,
that, like, there's simple things that I could automate. Like, I do our accounting for the business. I actually don't automate that stuff, not because I shouldn't, but because I kinda like doing I like, with analysis of markets, there's no answer. You have to actually, like, derive some kind of an answer, and it's a completely open question at all times. So it's very much a creative process as much as an analytical one. My accounting, I know exactly what the answer is. The left side has to equal the right side. And the journey for me actually doing that and like running through the spreadsheets and putting it through the QuickBooks and all that stuff, I actually find that very, very relaxing because it's the opposite of what I do in my day to day, which is creative. So it gives me that like, just I know what the answer is. I've just got to tweak some numbers until I get there. I actually like
yeah,
that process. So like for me, I think it's all about the journey. Use AI,
yeah,
you're dead right, accelerate it, but also I'm kind of okay in many ways to just like live in the real world because we live in such a fake world anyway. Sometimes I just like running through a spreadsheet and just like dicking around with some numbers and trying to get
yeah,
the two sides of the equation to balance. It's kind of fun.
yeah. I guess like I completely agree. Not with having fun with zero and finance and stuff when I don't have the time. I've outsourced it to the bookkeeper, accountant, and stuff. But when I've got, say, like 4 or 6 hours free, I love slowing down and getting all the numbers and making sure they all align and seeing it there. But I have to
Totally.
have the capacity to be able to have a clear-headed mind to be able to do that. If I don't have it, I don't just want to get to the end of the day and be like, fuck, for the next 2 hours I need to look at numbers. Like, fuck that. I'll outsource that, but when I've got the time once a month, I will go through all the numbers, and when they align and it's perfect, you're like,
It's
yes, this
great.
is ours,
You get
this is
all
the
those little
ATOs.
wins along the way.
Yeah, And then you're like, fucking ATO, like, what did you do? What did you do over the last 12
Yeah.
months?
Thank you, Australian government, for doing 25% of the work. I very much
Yeah,
appreciate that.
it's
Yeah, here's
super
25% of
helpful.
the revenue, you bastards.
It's absolutely crazy. Talking about the Australian government and fucking raising revenue, Division 296. I don't know if you're over it all, James, but a lot of Bitcoiners probably got Bitcoin in this self managed super fund, or it's long story short, it's an unrealized capital gains. For any gains over $3 million, they want to tax it at 15%. There's no capital loss or unrealized capital gains loss to offset it. So it's not like you've sold it, you've realized the money. It's just, in my opinion, a communist party coming in and wanting to just steal money, basically. That doesn't exist in the slightest. But I'd like to know what your thoughts are in regards to it,
Oh,
maybe a little bit more
it's an
level-headed.
egregious overreach and the destruction of capitalism. I mean, it makes no sense whatsoever. And yet the proponents of it, the moment that you raise like, "Hey guys, have you thought about just like spending less money?" They're like, "Oh no, we can't do that. We've got to do this." Like, well, I think that's probably the solution. Like at the end of the day, now the problem is that we're obviously in a world where that's very unlikely to happen. Sadly, it's completely insane. I agree, but like, unfortunately, this is kind of the world we're in. I don't think it hasn't passed yet, right? They're still debating it or it's going through the loops. But
Yeah,
so look,
July it goes
TBC.
through.
Oh
Well,
god,
July it starts, so
so
yeah.
sorry, has it passed? So it's happening? I
No,
thought it
no,
was.
no, no, no.
They're
So
still going to do
July
the
is,
vote.
yeah, when it'll go through and they'll vote either
All
for
right.
or
So
against.
let's just see what happens. I mean, you can't do anything unless it does happen, but there has to be enough common sense to recognize that this destroys so many things. Like the perfect example is like farmland. They use this as a good example. Farmland is not something you can just like slice and dice easily. Like this is like generational family wealth, and by the way, they've got to pour money into these things to keep the farms going. This is not like an asset that you like, I'll just peel off a corner of some Bitcoin. I'll sell that patch of grass. It's like, no, it's like productive land. And like the whole thing just doesn't make, how do you start a business? How do you put a business in if you've got an unrealized capital gain? It's like you would have to sell equity in a business that's probably only just scraping by the skin of its teeth. It doesn't make sense. So look,
Yeah.
let's see. I certainly hope it doesn't go anywhere, but we can't do anything until it happens.
Yeah, I think one of the points on that is like people like, oh, it only applies to the rich. It's only for people over $3 million. But the catch there, ladies and gentlemen, it's not indexed to inflation. So
Yep.
$3 million, what, 15, 20 years, the purchasing power, like $250,000 in purchasing power, like you're fucked.
And think about
It's
this: that JP made this point at the Sydney Bitcoin meetup. It's very obvious. People escape inflation by buying assets. The government therefore has an incentive to print more money to push the price of those assets up, so they can continue to tax the unrealized gains of those assets. Which means people have to go into more assets, which means they print more money. Which means the more they did, the sooner that they turn the Aussie dollar into the peso, the quicker the government takes literally everything. So it's there's a crowbar next to my desk, and I'm certainly hoping I don't have to use it.
it's sinister. James, checkmate. It's always a freaking pleasure, man. This hour went quick, but first off, where can people find your newsletter, the work that you're doing? Where can people find you, just in general?
Yeah, so head over to checkonchain.com. That's where you'll find our newsletter. You can sign up for it. And we also have a charting website, which has got pretty much any Bitcoin strategy metric you could possibly want. That's all free. So go nuts if you're looking for Bitcoin charts. That's a place to go.
Awesome, and I'll link your X account below. I'll put all the links below in the description. But final thought on anything, whether we've covered it or not. Final message for the Bitcoin community, for the legends that are stacking sats.
Stay humble, stack sats. There's nothing else you can do.
Absolutely
It's
love it.
it just makes so much sense. And 11 p.m. Fridays appears to be the day. So that's what we're doing. So enjoy.
I absolutely love it. James, it's been a pleasure. For everyone out there, buy, stack, and chill. Please do something nice for yourself, somebody else out there. Be blessed. Peace.